Coogs House. The brackets are out. Houston's in the dance. Spent most of the year ranked as one of the top teams in the country. So why'd they get such a tough draw?
You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Cougs Daily Podcast, all about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth, and whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Cougs your first listen of the day. Appreciate you make your first listen each and every day. If you want to join the conversation, but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below what you like to eat in Wichita, Kansas, as that is a very familiar location. Houston is heading for the first potentially two games, first two rounds of the NCAA Tournament. Today's show is going to be brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We got more on that later. I want to talk some about the Big 12 getting screwed. That probably fits into the end of the show. I want to talk some about my first thoughts on Southern Illinois University of Edwardsville and kind of what makes them an intriguing opening round matchup. But I want to talk about how Houston just got handed the toughest draw possible here. Houston, third consecutive year as #1 seed. Not so extensive, somewhat research. Only 7 teams and programs have ever done that in 3 consecutive years. Phi Slamma Jamma only had one seed across those times. Now, it's a different time period back then. The bracket's a little bit different. But this is not something that happens very often. Houston dominant again this year. They did in the American and the Big 12 and the Big 12 over and over and over again. And they still get screwed on who they've got to play here. Houston, 1 seed in the Midwest Regional. That means you go through Wichita to open and Indianapolis to close before hoping to get San Antonio for the Final Four, cutting down those nets. I want to talk both reasons why I think this is one of the toughest brackets. And the first of which is you're going to be playing road games if this thing chalks out, right? Now, the next 3 seeds in the Midwest region, the 2 seed, the 3 seed, and the 4 seed all have drives of less than 3 hours to Indianapolis. Houston's over 1,000 miles away from Lucas Oil Stadium. And frankly, for what it's worth, Tennessee, Kentucky, I guess the 4 seed is Purdue. Those teams all travel well anyway, let alone to somewhere in their glorified backyards. And now here's the deal. That's where Houston's road record this year matters. Houston was undefeated on the road this season, 10-0. For what it's worth, they did lose a couple of neutral site games, but those are all close as well. They didn't lose a whole lot of games or a whole lot of anything, period. But this is where being road tested matters, because if it's possible for a Sweet 16 and Elite 8 game to feel like a true road game, that's what it's going to feel like for Houston. So one of the reasons I think that's the toughest road for Houston, even if they're going to be okay about it, is that you're potentially going to see those true road games in the Sweet 16 and Elite 8 against your 2 seed Tennessee, which is just down the road. Purdue is just next door. They're the 4 seed. You'd see them in the Sweet 16. And then the 3 seed, some alleviation, is Kentucky, which is also just down the road. Again, each of those programs does travel well as well. And throughout the week and throughout the next couple weeks, hopefully, we're looking at how those matchups would pan out, right? All of how that would go. The other reason, though, I think this is the toughest possible draw for Houston, and Houston feels a little screwed after the way that these brackets shook out, is their 8 seed. So the way the bracket works out, you get 1 seed is Houston, play the 16 seed. Winner of that game plays the 8-9. Admittedly, we're going to talk about Southern Illinois University of Edwardsville in a second, but if they get past the 16 seed, which I guess has been upset one time, right? That has happened one time. You'd play the winner of the 8-9 matchup. Your 8-9 matchup, if you're Houston in your bracket, is Gonzaga and Georgia. And Gonzaga at an 8 seed is just unbelievable. Gonzaga, not on the West Coast, is just unbelievable. Gonzaga is number 8 in KenPom, number 8 in Evan Maya, number 8 in the net ranking, and they're the number 8 seed in the Midwest Regional. That does not make sense. Mathematically, the 8 seed in KenPom, Evan Maya, and net should be somewhere like a 3-4 seed somewhere. And the 3-4 seed over on the West Coast bracket is Maryland. Like these things don't match up. There are a lot of 5, 6, and 7 seeds that do not have the resume that Gonzaga has as the 8 seed. There are a lot of 3 seeds, 4 seeds that are comparable resumes to what Gonzaga's done this year. Gonzaga is an analytical darling, but we've seen how that can be an indicator for how things shape up for them in the big dance. Now, admittedly, this is not just a Houston thing. Like Duke gets their 8-9 seed is Mississippi State and Baylor. We've seen Baylor, right? Baylor's not in their full selves right now. Auburn is Louisville and Creighton, and Louisville came in second in the ACC, but it's incredibly down here at the ACC. Creighton struggled with Big 12 play as well. Florida gets UConn and Oklahoma. This is the weakest UConn team in a long time. Oklahoma was 7-13 in the SEC and already got blown out once by Florida this season. Houston's 8-9 matchup is Gonzaga, and if they lose to Georgia, Georgia's also a top 35 team in Ken Palm. Georgia also had an impressive season in the SEC, relatively speaking. This just doesn't quite seem much snub. Now, I do think if it chalks out, you play Gonzaga, and Gonzaga's a good team. As far as things that isn't working in Houston advantage with Gonzaga is if you think it's a long way for Houston to Indianapolis, from Gonzaga to Wichita, Kansas for these round of 32 game, it's going to be a challenge getting fans there. They've got the tougher matchup on Thursday with Georgia. This feels, though, and we'll get closer to it when the game happens. Love Andy Patton, Locked on Zags, so I'm sure we'll talk to him if this is how it shakes out. But this feels like a styles makes fights kind of game. We've seen, Houston play these high scoring kind of teams before. Gonzaga still has Ryan Nembhard, who's pretty talented guard. They've got Khalif Battle, who Houston has seen before. Houston saw him at Temple when he led them in scoring for a period of time. This is a team that has BYU level of speed with some talented bigs as well. And we've also seen Houston kind of return that high level of scoring, high speed team back down to earth. Now, I will say that while the bottom half of the bracket for Houston is challenging, they probably have on paper the tougher top half of the bracket, the easier top half of the bracket in 1, 2, 3, in a 2, 3, 4 kind of sense. The difference to me there is that they're playing those teams again, like I said, somewhat at home for them. And for my money, I do think Tennessee is the best 2 seed. I like that Zakai Ziegler guy over there a whole heck of a lot. I think Barnes and Kelvin provide an interesting and fun storyline of a coaching matchup in the potential Elite 8 round, right? That's the kind of thing ESPN's going to love. That's probably why they're in the same bracket, frankly, right? The 12 seed is McNeese. A lot of people in our part of the world think very highly of McNeese, right? Will Wade is there doing a pretty good job at there. He'll probably get a power forward job at the end of the coaching cycle here. I don't think he has already, but McNeese is a popular. They say every year a 12 beats a 5 because a 12 is with the top mid-major schools and the 5 are the low end of the high major schools. So you see a 12 beat a 5 quite often. McNeese over Clemson will be a popular pick in that instance. I think McNeese is probably the best 12 seed. With injuries to Texas Tech and Iowa State, it sounds like Gilbert's out for Iowa State for the rest of the year. Tech has had their problems. Kentucky kind of leapfrogs them as the best 3 seed to me. Now, if those guys were healthy, I think it'd be a little bit different, but Kentucky's probably the best healthy 3 seed right now. Gonzaga is definitely the best 8 seed. As I look across this, Houston got stuck in a really, really tough region, playing really good teams. Some of them are going to functionally be on the road. And it feels odd that a team that started off the year in the top 5, took a couple losses early, but bounced our way back up to the top 5 and did nothing but dominate the Big 12 for the last 2 months, gets that draw. It's a really, really tough draw with a bunch of teams that are the best at their respective seeds in Houston's way. But I also feel like Houston's the best 1 seed. I feel like Houston's playing the best basketball in America. And every time I think I'm getting biased and talking myself into that spot, I remind myself actually That's a lot of national analysts are saying after the Big 12 championship game on Saturday. Going into the seeding, that's what a lot of people were saying about Houston as well. And Houston's as healthy as they've been. We've heard good news on Jalen Roberts' ankle. He warmed up before the championship game. He was never going to play in it, but he was out there warming up. Got some eyes on people got eyes on him, got to see him play and move around. Looks like he's moving fine. And I don't know if he plays the round of 64 game against 16 seed Southern Illinois University of Edwardsville, but I do think that he's playing in this tournament. Obviously, he's going to play well and effectively. Now, I've spent a lot of time looking at the entire path, and I do think Houston's got a path to victory in each of these games against each of these teams that isn't so far-fetched or each stretch. But I've spent a long time looking at all of them and not enough time looking at what Sampson and the staff are looking at. They're going to do this thing one team at a time. But before we get to all of that, today's show is brought to you by Factor. Eating healthy does not have to be complicated. With Factor, you get chef-made, dietitian-approved meals that are ready to eat and heat and eat in just 2 minutes, so you can fuel your body without the hassle of cooking. Factor meals arrive fresh, never frozen, with 40 options across 8 dietary preferences each week. You can customize your menu to fit your goals, whether that's calorie smart, protein plus, keto, anything you're doing, they're doing too. Now, again, I'm a teacher, I'm a coach, I have a toddler. I'd like to have a little bit of time to watch Severance on TV. I also, for what's worth, have to do this podcast. I got a lot of time. I got a lot of things to do with not a lot of time. The convenience of Factor meals is truly spectacular. They also offer smoothies and breakfast, all kinds of snacks for when you're on the go. Eat smart with Factors. To get started at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast. Use code Factor Podcast. Get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's use code Factor Podcast at factormeals.com/Factor Podcast. Get 50% off plus free shipping. Today's show is also brought to you by Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site that made for the skilled trade, Supply House. Whether you're into plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400 top brands, you'll always find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. If you need help with an order, Supply House is an expert to help support you with industry-leading service. So you always find a real person to talk to. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage, and now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo code SH5 for 5% off your first order at supplyhouse.com. Parker Ainsworth locked on Coogs. You know what? Houston's path to San Antonio as get ready for the Final Four and head that direction. It starts in Wichita, Kansas at 1 o'clock Central Time on TBS. If you're going to be watching on television, again, it's in Wichita. If you're getting there in person, they'll be playing the Southern Illinois University Edwardsville Cougars, actually. Now, I'm working on a couple different angles, trying to find someone to come on and talk some Cougar versus Cougar basketball. Interestingly enough, they do have some different people out there that cover the team in a little bit of a small school kind of sense. I am learning more about them each and every day, but I'll tell you what I got so far. They're an impressive Ohio Valley Conference team. Finished this season 13-7, second place in the regular season against Southeast Missouri. They beat Southeast Missouri in the conference championship, tournament championship game. They had to win that conference tournament to get here. I don't think they'd be here without it, hence being a 16 seed after winning the conference tournament. They've got a couple P4 games on their resume. P4 losses, Power 4 losses are to Indiana by 19, Illinois by 32. Those are both in the first week of the year, so I'm going to go back and watch those before the week is over, obviously, to kind of get ready for this one. I will say, as we've seen with Houston, teams change a lot between then and now. It's kind of hard to balance, watching them play against a high-end team with watching them play more recently and like finding some sort of a middle ground as far as what they're going to look like on Thursday. I will say it probably bodes well for Houston and preventing the upset that they haven't played a high caliber team in a long time. Nothing against the Ohio Valley Conference. It's just a little bit different level of basketball. Now, they're not what I would call an analytically very efficient team. We start looking at shot charts and percentages and things like that from across their season, trying to pick out what games to scout and look at. They take a lot of twos, but not necessarily a lot of layups and mic and shot area shots, right? Rayshawn Taylor is like their guard to watch. He's like over 19 points, almost 20 points per game, player of the year in that conference, most outstanding player of that conference tournament. Like he's the guy, Rayshawn Taylor. He's a 6'1" guard, gets in the lane, kicks it out, spits it out. He's got cool highlights on YouTube. He can get in the lane really quickly, shifty guy. I don't think he's going to be a problem for Houston, but he's going to get some points. He can really flat score. He's also kind of, at least when you look at their percentages, and looking for games to watch on them besides those early Power 4 games. When you look at percentages, he's also kind of like their best shooter or best threat shooting the ball from the outside. And so you'll see them work him off some high screens so he can pull up at the three-point line as opposed to getting downhill as well. I think that, it looks like in looking at stuff with those clips, a guy catching a lot of their lobs and stuff is Ring Malith. He's a 6'9" guy, double machine. Statistically had a bunch of doubles this year. He's averaging like 8 and change and 12. I mean, he reverse that, 12 points and like 8 and change rebounds. He's pretty solid, built as well. I don't know what his weight is, but he's 6'9", pretty well built on those clips. I did like looking at their fun fact, I guess, looking through their roster. They got a kid from Houston Yates, Joe Valerie. Joe Valerie started off, I guess, at a school in Arkansas and NAIA in Pittsburgh, but he's bounced around and found his way to SIUE as well. So got to be kind of some like interesting like clashing of worlds for him, getting to play Houston in their first trip to the big dance. Certainly while he's been there, but in a long time. Interesting thing looking at their roster is they've got a bunch of really big guys, 6'10", 6'11", et cetera. But they're like statistical production doesn't seem to come from them. They do play some minutes. They got, again, like 6'11" and stuff like that. Don't seem to do a whole lot of offensive things on the floor. Their defensive ratings aren't particularly high. And then, frankly, in the few clips I've gotten to watch so far, while I'm still looking for games, so if you've gotten to recommend, tell me down below. Ring Malith plays a lot of the 4 and 5 as well at 6'9". And so I wonder if they actually find more success going smaller in conference play or something like that. Now, they rebounded well against Ohio Valley Conference competition. They won a lot of rebounding battles in those games. They did not rebound very well against even like the next step up to like group of 5 kind of opponents. And that is to say that I think Houston will decisively win the rebounding battle if all things go as they should in that one. More fun facts on them. They're coached by Brian Barone. Brian Barone, if you're a Texas college basketball fan, like state of Texas college basketball fan, is son of old Aggie coach Tourney Barone. And Brian actually played for his dad there. And I was looking through stuff, and I think someone clipped it online. I saw it on X, I think, but it sounds like Kelvin coached against Tourney Barone when he first got to Oklahoma, and may have coached against Brian Barone as well as far as timelines go. Certainly the timelines work out if that's the case. Brian Barone's been coaching since 2001. He had a 1-year stint as an interim head coach at Butler Community College before getting the assistant job at SIUE. He's promoted the head coach there in 2019. He's been okay there. This is far and away his best team in terms of wins and losses and obviously conference finish and stuff like that. I do think, though, that this is a team that's kind of really happy to be here. We'll see what things look like as they go farther. Again, I do want to break this team down more in full. We got the bracket on Sunday night, did some work with some Locked On College basketball stuff. Talk about the full bracket and kind of that's the full picture of things, which you can find on Amazon Fire TV. Actually, I think like probably now or soon. That'll be cool stuff when that gets rolling. I'll obviously posting that on X and stuff like that as that's out. But Only had a limited amount of time to break down SIUE. I'm trying to get more on it. DMs are out to a handful of different people to cover them more specifically to kind of get more of a vibe and maybe have someone on to give us a scouting report on the other Cougars. I will say, as far as the other 16 seeds go, I don't know that any of them are standing out as a whole heck of a lot different. American is a team that I feel like I've seen on the bracket a lot of times from the Patriot League. I don't know what they look like this year, but it's a program that's been there a lot of times. Norfolk State, we've seen some before. For Houston, obviously, but I don't know there's any like big difference between them as much as it's like the 8-9. I think it's the big difference between what the one seeds look like in that first weekend. Speaking of teams and what they look like in the first weekend, one notable Big 12 team is not going to be playing in the NCAA tournament. And I can't really figure out why, especially when you look at some of the teams that got in over them. I think the Big 12 is getting screwed. And so I want to talk about that in a second. But before we get to that, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, because March Madness is here. And FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers get $200 back in bonus bets on your first $5 bet. It's a $200 back to use on everything from buzzer beaters, Cinderella stories, who's cutting down the nets in San Antonio, hint, the Cougs, all in one spot. I like the apps, easy, fast to get paid very, very quickly. Visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long.
The NCAA Tournament is here, and so is the Bracket Breakdown.
Locked On Podcast Network and Amazon Fire TV channels are teaming up to deliver NCAA Tournament coverage like never before. Watch studio shows featuring former players and Locked On's local experts as they guide you through every upset, buzzer beater, and bracket matchup.
Stream it all for free on Amazon Fire TV channel. Search Bracket Breakdown to see it all for free.
It's your team every day.
Gotta love Andy Knight. I'll be on that, I guess, some on Monday, and I'm sure the more Houston does throughout, the more we'll be on that. Really more of a testament to what the Cougs are doing, and I get the pleasure and the honor of covering that program. But fun time over there with what those guys are doing at Amazon. Locked on Cougs, Parker Ainsworth here talking about the Big 12. I think they're kind of getting screwed. And the Big 12 had a decent showing in the NCAA tournament. Going from region to region, you had, I almost said A&M, you had Iowa State. Then in the Western region, you had, as I go through this thing, Texas Tech, Kansas. And then in the Eastern region, you had Baylor, Arizona. That's it in the East. And then in our region, you had Houston, and representing the Big 12 in the Midwest. And that's where things fall flat. You'll notice there's a handful of teams not there. Oh, I mentioned BYU was in the East region. Almost forgot them. But West Virginia, not in this thing at all. And it's not that I didn't think that they were a bubble team or anything like that, but I think it's extra interesting when you factor in some of the teams that did get in. For instance, North Carolina and Texas are both in, and they had less quad one wins than West Virginia if you combined them. Right now, I understand that it's not the only measurement, not the only thing, but it does feel particularly icky to see North Carolina, Texas, and a handful of other like bigger brands, SEC schools like Oklahoma and Vanderbilt, that don't really have any argument on paper to be in the dance at all, in ahead of West Virginia. And I'm taking up for West Virginia as a Big 12 school here. And I want to get to why that matters for Houston in a second. But truthfully, I guess if you wanted to, blue-blooded or something, you could have picked Indiana. You could have picked Ohio State, right? Those kind of schools didn't get in either. I just think West Virginia had the best resume by and far out of all these schools I mentioned, including the ones that got in. And I think the reason I'm worried about this for Houston, and we'll see how things play out. You got to see how things play out, right? Is this feels like a moment where, Carolina's got a, person on the board of people picking teams. So they magically get in with one whole quad one win on the season. Okay. It's probably also not an accident that while they did get put on the play-in game with San Diego State line, the 11 seed, they're in a pretty good Southern bracket that's not so far from North Carolina. Get some people there and get some eyeballs in if they were to start making a run. They play an injured Iowa. If they win their first, I guess, playing game, they play Ole Miss, which is good, SEC good, right? Chris Beard. But then they could potentially play an injured Iowa State team in the round of 32. Things could fall different ways. And Texas is a similar vein. Texas is actually in Houston's bracket in the Midwest. They play a tough Xavier squad in the play-in game, and then potentially an Illinois squad in the round of 64, and then potentially a Kentucky in the round of 32. Excuse me. And so as I look at that, I'm like, okay, they didn't get great draws, but at any point, West Virginia would have been better off. And further, as a Big 12 school in Houston, we know the SEC dollar speaks a lot of volume, speaks high volumes in football and things like that, and the preseason rankings and yada, yada, yada. But this is where those kinds of things tend to rub me the wrong way, because those things matter now, right? You can say, well, so-and-so beat a bunch of top-ranked teams when their conference is full of those top-ranked teams in the preseason, because you're doing preseason polls on things. That applies in football, and it's clearly applying in basketball as well, where there's no analytical reason to put Carolina or Texas or Xavier, for that matter, in ahead of West Virginia at all. Frankly, the only argument San Diego State has is that they beat Houston in overtime at the end of a long week in Las Vegas. Outside of that, they ain't really got an argument either, right? And so as you look at this across the board, it's like, well, what did West Virginia do? They had 6 quad 1 wins. They had a tough roster season with a bunch of different guys coming in on the roster with injuries. Some major pieces get hurt. They still navigated ways to do that. And things got bad for them the last handful of ranked opponents, handful of quad 1 opponents. I think they were 0-5, their final 5 quad 1 games. Ultimately, I'm going to be hard-pressed to hear anyone say that it wasn't just because they lost to Colorado in that one round of the Big 12 tournament. It's going to be hard for someone to convince me that was not the final deciding factor, because Colorado was barely a quad 2 game, right? And so if they'd beaten Colorado, it's like they had an extra quad 1 win, but they'd have gotten a matchup with Houston in the quarterfinal. I think people would have just looked at that differently, right? And I don't think that's right. Javon Small is a great guard. Houston had their way with him, but on the whole, I think he's a really talented basketball player. I think this is a lot more about Houston. And if Houston's going to continue to be in the Big 12 and run this conference, it does not benefit them in any way to have a conference that they get to run, as they've been in charge of it for 2 years now, that the rest of the national perception is this. And it feels kind of funny to me that we ran the American for so long. It's like, we'll do it in a big boy conference. We'll come to the Big 12. It's like, actually, the Big 12, actually, maybe West Virginia coming through and getting their 6 quad 1 wins, being a Big 12 team, et cetera, should have counted for more. I just don't get Oklahoma. I don't get Vanderbilt. I don't get Texas. I don't get those teams making the tournament. I don't get North Carolina making the tournament. I can't believe. And frankly, with the play-in game against San Diego State and Xavier, Carolina and Texas may win a tournament game on paper, and that's ridiculous. An opportunity to waste it on those schools. I just don't. Those programs are not worth it. Not right now. They had great years in the past. I'm a big TJ Ford fan. Big. What was the guy's name? Drake May. Big fan. These schools aren't them. They aren't right now, and it's just crazy to see that. Crazy to see the Big 12 being screwed and left behind, and I just worry what that says about this conference that Houston's been running for 2 years now. But they got a lot more running to do in the Midwest region. All right, we're doing squad shows, we're doing Amazon shows. We're going to be talking March Madness. Again, I'm trying to find someone from SIUE to talk to. Got a couple of feelers out there, breaking down a lot of things here at Locked on Cougs each and every day as we go through March Madness, all kinds of chaos in the Midwest region. I'm here to Locked on Cougs, Parker Ainsworth. This has been Locked on Cougs, primarily Locked on Podcast Network. That means your team every day. Go Cougs.